Well, as we said after Saudi Arabia, there was going to be no doubt at all that the Ferrari was going to be super quick around Melbourne, Albert Park, Melbourne. A revised Albert Park, smoother, fewer corners, wider entries, a bit easier, you might say. Oops, better not say that about current Formula One drivers. We'll get onto that in a minute. No, there was no doubt that the Ferrari, given the pace it had shown around the full lap in Saudi Arabia and indeed in Bahrain, that they were going to be super quick in Melbourne. And so it proved. Carlos Sainz looking superb in the first session in the early afternoon in Melbourne. And then later on, Charles Leclerc going quickest on the soft tyre runs in FP2. It didn't look as if Carlos at that point got in the perfect lap, and Charles was on the absolute edge. There was a bit of bouncing in the Ferrari as well. It looks like they were just living with it going into turns 9 and 10. Very impressive to watch. Very, very fast, the current Formula One cars around Albert Park. First time back there, of course, since the aborted attempt to run there in 2019 in effect. So yeah, Ferrari really, really good. But it was going to be fascinating, I think, to see how Adrian Newey and Red Bull approach Melbourne, whether they were able to parlay, as I said at the time after Saudi Arabia, whether they're going to be able to parlay some of that incredible top speed they showed in the latter, particularly in the latter stages of the race when the fuel load was lighter, into more downforce and be a genuine one-on-one match for Ferrari around the lap. Well, they are a genuine match. The time's incredibly close between Max Verstappen and throw Sergio Perez in there as well, and the two Ferrari drivers, Charles and Carlos. But they're putting the laps together very, very differently. And it was significant, I thought, that when we saw the fuel runs at the back end of FP2, the second session today, let's have a look at those. It was significant, I thought, that the Red Bull was losing a lot more top speed with a heavy load of fuel than the Ferrari. And what does that indicate? Because acceleration and therefore top speed is affected more by the weight of the car, as distinct from, say, cornering grip being affected by additional weight in the car, it's pretty clear, given the amount of speed that Red Bull lost when they went to the full fuel runs, that their lap of Albert Park is constituted more from a top speed advantage than it is from any sort of inherent grip advantage around the overall lap. Nothing new there. That's basically what we've been seeing in the first two races. But Albert Park underlined that. And I think it's underlined that Red Bull have kind of got to the point where they're thinking, well, where do we go next with this car? Both drivers, I've got to say, both drivers said after FP2 that both Red Bull drivers, that they changed, or the team changed the setup of the car at the back end of FP2 and things were a lot better. I have to say, I couldn't see from the outside what that was. It didn't look as if it was anything to do with wing levels or anything top speed. So let's just have a look at, just so you know what I'm talking about, look at the top speeds on the light fuel runs when, as we know, Charles Leclerc was slightly quicker than Max Verstappen. Max doing 320 kilometers an hour consistently through the speed trap. And yes, you could say, well, it all depends how much wing they're running, but it is a relevant factor if you take a picture across the board of the full day of running and indeed relate it to teammates and to the opposition. Right up there too, incredibly, now in a blue Alpine, looking a lot nicer in blue, Fernando Alonso and Esteban Ocon very quick as well in the other car. This is top speed runs on light fuel, 320 kilometers or thereabouts. Sergio Perez thereabouts as well, 318. And then we've got another Honda powered car, Yuki Tsunoda and Pierre Gasly, 315, 314. Look where Lewis Hamilton and George Russell are with the Mercedes, still struggling in a straight line, 313, 3111. But Charles Leclerc and Carlos Sainz, 311, 309, down there with Valtteri Bottas in the other Ferrari engine car, the Alfa Romeo, of course, who went very well, got to say, that's another story again. But now let's have a look at some of the fuel runs. Here's Charles Leclerc doing a fabulous 122.9, top speed 290 kilometers an hour. And now we compare that with Max Verstappen, who did exactly the same lap time, 283 kilometers an hour through the speed trap with a heavy load of fuel, doing the same lap time. So that to me suggests that yes, there is a top speed advantage at Red Bull, and they're eating into that, of course, when the weight goes into the car. But on the overall lap, in terms of grip, and therefore you got to say balance, and the way they treat the tires, Ferrari look to have the edge over Red Bull at the moment. I think that showed a little bit with the way Max Verstappen was putting longish runs together on light fuel. He was doing his quickest run on light fuel, lap 6 or 7 or 8 on a new set of soft tyres, whereas Charles Leclerc and Carlos Sainz could go out, and providing they did a reasonably good job building the tyres up to temperature on the outlap, they could be really quick on their first flying lap, which would have been, of course, lap 3. So very impressive performance again from Ferrari. A pretty faultless day for them, apart from the odd sort of Charles Leclerc Friday thing where he went off on cold tyres going into turn 1 and he had another spin somewhere, I think. And Carlos Sainz lost a little bit of track time, and there were a few argy-bargies with slower cars. But in general, a really good day for Ferrari. They must still be thinking, is this real? Has this season transformed Formula One for us in the way that it appears from circuit to circuit? Well, the answer is certainly from Saudi Arabia to Albert Park, which is kind of from one extreme to the other. Okay, Albert Park isn't Monaco, but it's still a street circuit, and it's still got some tight corners. It's all about traction, really. There's a lot of traction episodes there around Albert Park. But let's just get on to the revisions to the circuit. It's much smoother now. First time they've resurfaced the entire track at Albert Park, and that's a good thing. Although it was interesting to see a lot of drivers say, yeah, it's much smoother now. But then we got to Pierre Gasly at AlphaTauri saying, it's just as bumpy as it was. So I think that's a function of how much porpoising you got in the car as well. An interesting observation, that one, I think, from the AlphaTauri driver. And then, of course, some of the corners, notably turn 1 and some of the others, are wider on entry. And the logic here is to, dare I say it, generate more overtaking opportunities. I suppose this has to be seen in the context of the current Formula One car just growing bigger and bigger and fatter and heavier by every passing year. And so therefore the circuits have to start getting wider and bigger to accommodate them, which is kind of sad, isn't it? And then beyond that, Lando Norris was saying, I kind of understand why they've had to do this because, these cars are really quick and, implying that they need a bit more room in case people make mistakes or they go off or things go wrong. And it's all a function of how quick these cars are. But I got the undertone of Lando's comments was, but I still prefer the old one. Partly because he's a racer, isn't he? He's a racing driver, and he speaks for the likes of, the Lewises, the Maxes, the Charles. And these guys love bumpy, difficult, narrow approaches to corners from very high speed because that is what they do. That is their DNA. Whereas lesser drivers, I'm not saying they're not all very, very good Formula One drivers. They are, of course, but there is a difference between the very best and the very good. And the difference is, of course, that finessey feel for where the bump is to avoid in order to maximize your braking, how to apply the brakes over the bump if there's no way around it, how to make sure the car's absolutely square on the road if you are going to have to go over a bump under braking. All these little finessey things, to some extent, you could say haven't been taken away. I'm sure there's still lots of things you can hit the wrong way at Albert Park, the wrong angle, the wrong speed, but it's less of a challenge in terms of the overall lap. Much more of a challenge, probably, in terms of the pace and cars being near you. And let's bring the next subject into the conversation, which is overtaking. Now, they've got 2 DRS zones now on the back side of the circuit on the quick bits, and they've taken out some of the S-bends and slow corners there as well. So it's a pretty fast section around the back, 2 DRS zones. And the thinking is, wider track, smoother surface, let's have more of what we had in Saudi Arabia, let's have more overtaking, more of this on the straight. It's brilliant television. I would just have a note of caution at this point, which is, and it goes back to fundamentals, and it's a point I've always made and usually make around Monaco Grand Prix time, which is that the most dangerous parts of any Grand Prix circuit now, particularly now that they're all so safe, are by definition the straights, because those are the areas where not enough time, money, effort, space is spent on accident avoidance, because generally speaking, there are no accidents or very few accidents on the straight. I think Romain Grosjean was a bit of a wake-up call there because he hit a bit of guardrail on the inside, and it was the beginning of the straight in Bahrain, where normally you wouldn't go off and have a big accident, and we saw that was a big guardrail-defined accident. And so it goes on, in my mind. If you do have the big one in a straight, on any circuit of the world, but particularly going up the hill, say at Monaco, or at Albert Park, you can have a really, really big shunt because there isn't anywhere to go. It is guardrail and it's very, very high speed by definition. Now, I say all this because I think, and this is my note of caution, I think it's very, very easy to be sucked into the whole computer game thing, and I keep saying that, of isn't this overtaking brilliant? Let's have more overtaking on the straight. And the more we encourage this overtaking and passing and repassing, the more you put very high-speed Grand Prix cars in a confined area, in a straight line, closely together, with DRS zones there to make it easy to overtake, the more likely there's going to be some sort of incident, because these are big cars as well. This is just a note of caution about the road that I think we're going down at the moment, which is more, bigger, bigger. And it's not always the case in Formula One. I think the time has come with these 2022 cars to think about not whether we should double DRS zones, but whether we should take the DRS away from the cars completely, because in theory we do have cars that are easier to follow in terms of dirty air. And it was interesting, the number of drivers and engineers after FP2 who were saying that from what they could see from the running today at Albert Park, there wasn't going to be a lot of opportunity for overtaking anyway around there. So what is the point of all these DRS zones? Anyway, that was my $1 worth on where we're going at Albert Park, certainly, but potentially where I think we might be going at other circuits as well. I just think we need to be very careful about what we do with these cars in a straight line, and how much we do encourage drivers to be bunched together on the straights. So yeah, I've said what I've said, and now we'll move on. Ferrari looking very good, and the way they manage the medium tyre, and it looks like they've got less graining than, say, Red Bull and some of the other teams in terms of bringing that tyre up to temperature and not getting it into that graining phase, but graining nonetheless at the moment with the track conditions as they are. And don't forget, this circuit will pick up grip and rubber as we head towards the race through the weekend. Graining may become less of a factor. Carlos Sainz not quite as impressive on the full fuel load as Charles Leclerc, but nonetheless very, very impressive by any other standards if you're a Mercedes driver, for example. And I put a few of the other runners here. Lewis Hamilton, let's have a look at what Lewis did. Yeah, you know, that kind of says it all, doesn't it? 24.8. It's a pretty good lap. George did a 24.5 in the other MERC. And the interesting there, of course, is that they're not losing very much in terms of top speed relative to their top speed on light fuel. And that's, I guess, because this car has a lot of downforce, a lot of drag, and that is why they're still getting porpoising, and that is why they still can't get the balance and the grip level right. So you would imagine, of all the things that might have happened after Saudi Arabia, you'd imagine there would have been a complete and utter rethink at Mercedes in terms of how much downforce can we run on this car to get the thing to have some sort of balance and grip level. And yeah, obviously they've been working in some direction, but I get the feeling, just looking at the team and listening to the drivers between the lines, that a lot of the fixes they've put on the car are not related to just taking downforce out of the car. It's changing this, doing that. And they're still suffering big time with a lot of drag in that car, and a very difficult car. Yeah, I suppose now is the right time to just reiterate what I've been saying about Lewis from the start of the year. I did a podcast, I think it was for an Australian podcast a couple of weeks ago, and they said, you know, how's Lewis's frame of mind? And I said, well, I think the right time to judge Lewis's frame of mind, and I've said this before in a video, is going to be around mid-season, because if the car is difficult, and this was before the season started, I've got to say, if the car is difficult, and Max, and let's say some other team, I don't think I mentioned Ferrari, but Max is easily ahead on points, and it's a difficult car to drive, and he's not enjoying his racing, that is the moment when all the stuff that happened last year is going to start to have its true effect on Lewis's psyche. And he's a very strong guy, and he loves his motor racing. And I hope that, and I'm sure we all hope, that at that moment he says, no, the challenge is brilliant, let's carry on, let's think about 2023 or whatever it is. But that is going to be the difficult moment. And at the moment, I think he's still in the mode of saying, well, you know, we're trying things and let's hope the car's going to be better tomorrow. But he did sound, I got to say, he did sound today as if for the first time he was thinking, this is not fun. We're just throwing everything we know at the car at Brixworth, and we're going nowhere. Not Brixworth, at Brackley, and we're going nowhere. And the car's just the same. And I get the feeling that, you know, this thing of having won 7 world championships and enjoyed his Formula One career as much as he has over the years, and suddenly driving the same lap, exactly the same lap, but being a second and a half off the pace is something that is going to be, you know, it's going to be increasingly difficult for Lewis to live with. Completely different situation for George, of course, because George is young, he's out there. All he needs to do is actually go quicker than Lewis every time he gets in the car, and job's done, isn't it? And that's kind of what happened today, actually. 24.5 on a full load of fuel for George Russell, and Lewis Hamilton 24.8. 24.8, and, you know, just see that alongside 22.9 from Charles Leclerc and Max Verstappen. And you can be sure there's a lot more from both of those two as well, Ferrari and Red Bull. So, you know, that is a massive amount when you think of how quick and how good Lewis Hamilton is as a racing driver, and how latently quick George Russell is. I mean, that is an unbelievable indictment, really, of where the Mercedes car is at the moment. I thought Fernando Alonso did a good job, very good job. You know, he was quick. He spent a bit more time getting a lap time out of the Alpine on the soft tyres. But he did get the lap time out of it, and that was good. And then on a full fuel run, look at the consistency of Fernando Alonso. He was saying afterwards, you know, the balance wasn't that good, but yeah, 24.1, 24.2, 24.1, 24.2, 24.4. Doesn't get much better. I think Alan Permain was very pleased with that. And McLaren starting to, I mean, whether it's just circuits and this is a different circuit and there's less to penalise, what was wrong with the McLaren, with its, where the porpoising occurs for the McLaren on a circuit like Saudi Arabia. It's less here in Melbourne. Maybe it's some other factors as well. They've done a little bit of revisions. You can see those on Twitter under @Scarbs Tech as ever. But Lando said, you know, there's probably nothing in that, maybe a tenth. It's more to do with the circuit being a bit more compliant to where they are with the car. And both Daniel and Lando putting in some pretty good long runs there, 25.2, 25.2, 24.5, Lando 24.4, shorter run from Daniel Ricciardo, although he did do a better run with a lighter fuel load, but not completely light in the morning, I think it was. So there's just a list of the top 13, have to get down to 13 to have Lewis Hamilton. And the other news, the big news, is that Formula One continues to expand its footprint in the United States. Delighted to hear that it'll be returning to Las Vegas. For those that were at Las Vegas for the races there in the early 80s, it was a great Grand Prix. My only slight reservation, my only regret about this, and I think I've written about this in columns in F1 Racing, if not talked about it on video as well. I've always wished and hoped that one day somebody, some trillionaire in Vegas, would understand Formula One and catch the Formula One bug and do what they've done with the Eiffel Tower and a few other things there in that city in Nevada, which is to build a complete replica of the Nordschleife in the desert near Vegas downtown, and to have this 15-mile Grand Prix circuit, the greatest Grand Prix circuit of all time, but built to modern standards with runoff area and everything else, but with the jumps, with everything else. It could only have happened in Vegas. And everybody just goes to Vegas City at night and gambles or whatever they do. I think that's what, I mean, obviously it was a pipe dream, but I've always wished that could have happened. And as I say, there's nowhere else in the world that would have happened other than Vegas. But wouldn't that be great? Instead of which, I think we're going to have yet another of these, you know, city races downtown Vegas, as if, I mean, the fact that we're in Vegas is enough. We don't actually have to be in Vegas for the racetrack. The Formula One circus can be in Vegas, but if we go out somewhere near Nellis Air Force Base or somewhere cool like that, would it really be a problem? I don't think so. I mean, the Vegas IndyCar race is in a speedway out near Nellis, actually, and it doesn't suffer for not being downtown in Vegas. It's still a Vegas IndyCar race. So that's just coming back to my point. That wouldn't have been brilliant if they built this Nordschleife or the old Spa or something like that. It just would have been so cool for Formula One to do something like that in America, to take its European heritage and put it into Vegas, like the Eiffel Tower. Anyway, that isn't happening. It is going to be one of these, you know, standard street races, which as a circuit, it probably won't be brilliant. But as a race, as an occasion, of course, it'll be fabulous. So that'll be good fun. So there we are, and look forward to seeing you tomorrow.